गणपति बाप्पा मोरया। ओम गंगणपतये नमो नमः। श्री सिद्धि विनायक नमो नमः। अष्ट विनायक नमो नमः। गणपति बाप्पा मोरया। Om Gangadapataya Namah. On behalf of Chicago Kalibari, we welcome you, Arunji, on this
Thank
Tuesday
you.
satsang. Thank you.
Thank you. अगजानन पद्मार्कं गजानन महर्निशम् अगजानन पद्मार्कं गजानन महर्निशम् अनेकदन्तं भक्तानामेकदन्तमुपास्महे। सुरासुरासेवितपादपङ्कज करे विराजत्कमनीय पुस्तक विरिञ्चि पत्नी कमलासनस्थिता सरस्वती नृत्यतु वाचि मे सदा। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयम् श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयम् नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम्। अपार करुणा सिन्धुं ज्ञानदं शान्तरूपिणं श्रीचन्द्रशेखर गुरुं श्रीचन्द्रशेखर गुरुं प्रणमामि मुदान्वहम्। प्रणमामि मुदान्वहम्। शिव 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 यनराधा शिव 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 यनराधा शिव 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 यनराधा शिव 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 यनराधा ओरि भव भय बादल नन चुकोरदा शिव 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 यनराधा ओरि भव भय बादल नन चुकोरदा शिव 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 यनराधा ओरि भव भय बादल नन चुकोरदा शिव 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 यनराधा ओरि भव भय बादल नन चुकोरदा शिव 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 यनराधा। कामदुल दगकोसी कामदुल दगकोसी कामदुल दगकोसी बहुमामल परुल धनमूल गोसी कामदुल दगकोसी परबामल परुल धनमूल गोसी పామరత్వము ఎడబాసి ఓరి పామరత్వము ఎడబాసి ఓరి పామరత్వము ఎడబాసి ఓరి పామరత్వము ఎడబాసి ఓరి పామరత్వము ఎడబాసి అతి నియమముతో బిల్వార్చన దేశీ పామరత్వము ఎడబాసి అతి నియమముతో బిల్వార్చన దేశీ శివ 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 ఎనరాదా ఓరి భవ భయ బాదల ననచుకోరద శివ 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 ఎనరాద ఆగమములను తిగించి ఈ ఆగమములను తిగించి ఈ ఆగమములను తిల్చి ఈ ఆగమములను తిల్చి బహు బాగులేని బదల చలించి ఆగమములను తిల్చి బహు బాగులేని బదల చలించి భగవతులతో పోషించి ఓరి భగవతులతో పోషించి ఓరి భగవతులతో పోషించి ఓరి భగవతులతో పోషించి ఓరి భగవతులతో పోషించి వరత్యగరాజసనుతుడనియచి భగవతులతో పోషించి వరత్యగరాజసనుతుడనియచి శివ 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 ఎనరాదా ఓరి భవ భయ బాదల ననచుకోరద శివ 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 ఎనరాద శివ 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 ఎనరాద శివ 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 ఎనరాద हर हर पार्वती पतये नमः हर हर महादेव Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaskaram everyone. On the occasion of Pradosham, it is my sincere pleasure to present today's Katha Kacheri on the meaning of Pradosham and the glory of Shri Shiva, Shri Uma Maheshwara, Shri Parvati Parameshwara. As we just heard Shri Tyagaraja Swami say, Shiva 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 Yanarada Ori Bhavabhaya Badala Nanatsu Korada. Is there anything more fruitful than chanting the name of Lord Shiva? Even a stout Rama Bhakta such as Tyagaraja acknowledges the power and the gains of chanting Shivanama. Unlike many of our holy times that start at sunrise or are during the day, Pradosha Kalam starts at sundown. In fact, that is actually one of the meanings of Pradosham. It means nightfall or after dark. Kanchi Mahapariva Shri Chandrasekhara Saraswati gives a beautiful and simple explanation for why this event happens at night. And I'm just praising here. This is from his work, Devattin Kural, the word of God, as it translates to. Ishwaran makes this time his own. As the world goes to rest and creation comes to an end for a spell, Ishwaran takes back all of the energy during this time, and nothing else exists but him. It is during this time that Lord Shiva, as Nataraja, dances in ecstasy. Ghanana, ghanana, ghanana. Ghanana, ghanana, ghanana. Gunguru bhaje. Ghanana, ghanana, ghanana. Gunguru bhaje. Ghanana, ghanana, ghanana. Gunguru bhaje. देव मुनि सब गगन विराजे गणन गणन गण घुंघरू बाजे देव मुनि सब गगन विराजे शंकर श्री गिरि नाथ प्रभु के नृत्य विराजित चित्र सभा में शंकर श्री गिरि नाद प्रभु के नृत्य विराजित चित्र सभा में शंकर श्री गिरि नाद प्रभु के तान तत कीट तक तान तत कीट तक श्रुति गति राजे 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 तान तकिट तक श्रुति गति राजे तान तकिट तक श्रुति गति राजे पदुमनाभ मन सगल विराजे तान तकिट तक श्रुति गति राजे पदुमनाभ मन कमल विराजे शंकर श्री गिरि नाथ प्रभु के नृत्य विराजित चित्र सभा में शंकर श्री गिरि नाथ प्रभु नाद प्रभु नाद प्रभु के So as Shiva dances, he attracts everything towards him. That ecstasy of the dance, that power of the dance attracts everything towards him, thus making him the singularity in that time. The Tamil saint poet Manikavachakar says in his work Shiva Puranam, அன்பருக்கு அன்பனை யாவையுமாய் அல்லையுமாய் சோதியனே துண்ணிருளே தோன்றா பெருமையனே ஆதியனே அந்தம் நடுவாகி அல்லானே ஈர்த்தென்னை ஆட்கொண்ட எந்தே பெருமானே. To your devotees, you are everything. You are both light and darkness. You are the beginning, the end, and everything in between. You drew me closer into you and made me your own. Irthenne aatkonde ende perumane. Now, the line about being both light and darkness is curious to some, but it actually makes sense. Shodiyane tunnirule tondra perumayane. Typically, we say God is the embodiment of light. You know, we always say God in the form of light dispels darkness. However, in Advaita Vedantam, where God is present in everything, you cannot just say God is one thing. If God is just light, that means he's absent from darkness, but he is in everything. So therefore, God is both light and darkness. Similarly to the idea of drawing us in, Ramana Maharshi says in his Aksharamanamala, காந்தம் இரும்பு போல் கவர்ந்தனை விடாமல் கலர்ந்த நோடிருப்பாய் அருணாச்சலா. Like a magnet that attracts iron, you drew me in and let me become one with you. Kandam irumbu pol, like a magnet to iron. Shri Adishankara Bhagavat Padacharya in his Nirvana Shatakam describes that ultimate state of consciousness that transcends the physical world and allows us to become one with this Paramatma, Parameshwaran, Shiva. Manobuddhyahankara chinta ninagam na cha shrota jihve na cha grana netre na cha vyoma bhumir na tejo na vayuh chidananda rupah shivoham shivoham chidananda rupah shivoham shivoham chidananda rupah shivoham shivoham. Basically, he says, I am neither this nor that. I am not the sense of eyes, the sense of sight. I'm not my ears, my nose. I'm not the earth. I'm not fire. I'm not wind. Ultimately, I am that eternal Shiva. Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. To draw one more parallel to this Nirvana Shatakam, this idea of transcending consciousness beyond the physical world, Swami Vivekananda has a bhajan in Bengali as part of his hymn for Samadhi, where he says his consciousness exists in a place beyond even the sun, the moon, and all light, beyond the sense of ahankaram, beyond the sense of aham, maham, me, nan, whatever you want to call it in your language. Nahi surjo, nahi jyoti, nahi shashanka sundar, bhashe bhyom, chaya sham, chabi bishwa chora chor, nahi surjo, nahi jyoti. Ashputa Monakash Jagata Samsaro Bashe Othe Bhashe Bhome Puna Aham Shrote Nirantar Nahi Shurjo Nahi Jyoti. धीरे धीरे छाया धाल महलाय प्रवेशील भय मात्र ओमियमे यही भार अनुकान से धरो बद्ध हाल शून्य शून्य मिलाइल आभान मानस गोचरम भोगे प्राण भोज जार नहि सूर्य नहि ज्योति नहि शशांक सुंदर भोगे भोष छाया श्याम छवि विश्व छोरा छोर नहि सूर्य nahi jyoti. So you see how this idea of complete oneness with Parabrahma, Parameshwaran, Paramatma is the sign of a truly great person, an enlightened person, what we consider a guru, a mahan. So this is actually what happens in Upanyasam and Kathas. You tend to go down these offshoots, and by the time you've explained what you were going to, you've forgotten where you originally started. This happens all the time. It's actually one of the marks of a Harikatha, Katha, Kalakshapam, Upanyasam, as you will. So going back to Pradosha Kalam, Mahapariva says that this actually happens every night during the Pradosha Kalam after sundown, But what makes our Trayodashi Pradosham special? If you look on our calendars today, it is Trayodashi Titi, the 13th day. So basically what we have come to know as the Pradosha Kalam, in which we should do our Shiva Sevanam, Shiva Puja. There are many reasons that have been put forth. One of the reasons that has been put forth goes back to the story of the churning of the ocean. I've said it in the past. I'll say it today, and I will probably end up saying it at least a dozen more times going forward. But this story is one of the most important in our Dharma. It is told and retold across many of our sacred texts, such as Vishnu Puranam, Skanda Mahapuranam, Ramayanam, Mahabharata, Srimad Bhagavatam, etc. This story basically includes all of the major players, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, all of the Devatas, and it begets so many other stories from it. It includes things like the birth of Kamadhenu, Airavrata, Lakshmi Kalyanam, and in fact, in the Mahabharata Adi Parva, the story, the legend of Garuda, how Garuda got his powers actually starts from the horse that came out of the ocean during the churning. So really everything kind of connects back to this story. Typically, this story is framed and centered around the basis for Mahavishnu taking the Kurma Avatara, the form of a tortoise, to support the mountain. So many of us know the general story. The Devas are cursed by sage Durvasa and lose their godlike status. They are driven out of the world by the Asuras. They go to Brahma, who tells them to get the nectar of immortality from the ocean of milk. Then, upon advice from Mahavishnu, the Devas and Asuras form an alliance to get the nectar with the idea that they would split it in half once obtained. They use Mount Mandara as a churn and the snake king Vasuki as a rope. So, what happens next? All of a sudden, poison fills the air and everyone is forced to evacuate, or everyone becomes incapacitated in some manner. So, if you're watching this in a movie or in a live dance drama, this is typically where you'll see a cutscene or a spotlight, and you see some sort of representation of Mount Kailasham, and Shiva and Parvati will appear, and then Jal 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 Tate Tam, they'll do some Tandavam dance, and then they'll take a seat. And then all the Devas and Asuras will come rushing up to them. In the overall scheme of the story, some think that Shiva is kind of a secondary character, but he absolutely is not. We think, the Devas come, he drinks the poison, and they resume the churning of the ocean. There's so much more that goes on around the event of him taking the poison, and that's what we'll be looking at. We'll start by looking at why the poison is called the Alakhala Visham or Kala Kala poison, Kala Kuta poison in some cases. Kala Kala Alahala, why twice? Why say Alahala? As the mountain rubbed along the bottom of the ocean, it churned up substances that mixed with the air and created a toxic poison. Additionally, the strain on Vasuki, the snake king, being used as a churn made him cough up poison. So there were two sources that combined to make this Ala Hala poison, Kala Kala poison. So poison squared, you can think about it. The strength of the poison was such that it incapacitated all of the Devas, all of the Asuras, Brahma, Vishnu, and all 14 lokas. In some versions of the story, it actually completely wipes out and destroys all of the world, leaving only Shiva and Parvati. So why do they survive? Shiva is the one who is the Lord of Destruction, Rudran, and the conqueror of death, Mrityunjayan. Therefore, he is in a way immune to the effects of this destructive poison. He is Parameshwaran, Parabrahman, Paramatman. He is the one who is beyond the universe itself. And as Shakti is inseparable and one with Shiva, she too remains with him. In fact, there is a name in Lalita Sahasranamam Maheshwara Mahakalpa Mahatandava Sakshini. When all of the cosmos is dissolved in the Mahakalpam, the great destruction, only she and Shiva will remain, and she watches Shiva dance his Mahatandavam. And this is really where the events on Kailasham, as far as the churning of the ocean story, begin, to say the least. As Shiva watches the worlds wither under the effects of the poison, he realizes what he has to do. He turns to Parvati and asks casually, "Shall I drink the poison?" Normally, we would think that a spouse would, hear this question and say, "What? Are you crazy? Why would you even ask that?" However, Parvati looks at Shiva very calmly and says, "Sure." So for those who know Tamil, unfortunately, I can't enact this in another language, but for those who know Tamil, if you picture just a casual question, "Uma, Amma, Vashate kudikata?" And then Parvati will look at him just casually, "Kudingo enne." Why would she say this? How could she be so sure that he would be okay? And Shankaracharya explains this in the Saundarya Lahari. Sudhamapyasvadhya pratibhayajar mrityuharini. Sudhamapyasvadhya pratibhayajar mrityuharini. Vipadhyante vishve vidishatamakhadyadi vishadaha. Karalam yat kshvelam kabalitavata kalakalana. Karalam yat kshvelam kabalitavata kalakalana. Na shambhostan tava janani tatangamahima. Na shambhostan tava janani tatangamahima. While the devas and those who drank amridam eventually will perish, we saw in the Mahakalpam, how is it that Shiva, who drank poison, remains or never dies? Amma, Mata, it is because of the greatness of your Tadanga Mahima, your earrings. Why earrings? It seems like a very strange piece of jewelry to associate with the survival of Shiva, the survival of a spouse. And for this, I've also heard two explanations that I'll share. One is that in the Shastras, it says that a spouse, a Dharma Patni, should wear jewels on her neck, the Mangalya Sutra, her ears, Tadangam, and her arms, Kankanam. So in this case, the jewels on her ear are a symbol of all of these, and therefore are a symbol of the union of her and Shiva. So her Shakti, her energy will save him. The other explanation I've heard is that in Devi's earrings, there's a name in Lalita Sahasranamam, Tadanga Yugali Bhuta Tapanodu Pamandala. She holds Suryan and Chandran, the sun and moon, the prime deities of time and the cycle of life and destruction. Since she holds them and controls them in her ears and is one with Shiva, both of them are above the conventional cycles of time, creation, and destruction. Therefore, the poison does not affect Shiva. Now, the way in which Shiva takes poison also differs between the versions. In some versions, he takes the form of a lingam that roots itself in the ocean of milk and absorbs all of the poison. In the case of what many of us probably know, he collects the poison in his hands and drinks it. So if you imagine kind of an Indian serial, one episode would probably be the poison getting into Shiva's hands, holding the poison, and for about 10 minutes. And then the other 20 minutes, you'll see Parvati's face reacting, Ganesha's face reacting, Indra, Vishnu, Brahma. They'll just flash back and forth 20 minutes or so. So just reaction shots and then him holding the poison. So it basically probably take about a 3-4 episode arc for Shiva to actually drink the poison. But this is not what happens by any means. Shankaracharya, again, in his other work, so we just heard from Saundarya Lahari, which is on Ambal. Now we'll hear from another beautiful work on Parameshwaran called Shivananda Lahari, where he describes this incident. Nalam va paramopakaramkamidam tvekam pashunam pate. Nalam va paramopakaramidam tvekam pashunam pate. Pashyan kukshigatan charaganan bahyasthitan rakshitum. सर्वामर्त्यापलायनौषधमति ज्वालाकरं भीकरम् सर्वामर्त्यापलायनौषधमति ज्वालाकरं भीकरम् निक्षिप्तं गरलं गलेन गणितं नोद्गीर्णमेव त्वया ज्वालोग्रासकलामरातिभयद क्ष्वेलकतं वा त्वया ज्वालोग्रासकलामरातिभयदक्ष्वेलं कथं वा त्वया दृष्टः किञ्चन करे धृतकरतले किं पक्वजम्बूफलम् दृष्टः किञ्चन करे धृतकरतले किं पक्वजम्बूफलम् जिह्वायां निहितश्च सिद्धकुटिका वाकण्ठदेशे भृता किं ते नीलमणिर्विभूषणमयं शम्भो महात्मन् वद किं ते नीलमणिर्विभूषणमयं शम्भो महात्मन् वद. In the first verse, Shankaracharya describes the grace of Shiva and his desire to protect, saying, "Are you not but the only one sufficient to help us? Your desire to protect you, your selflessness to protect you, is demonstrated when you took the poison." In the second verse, he incorporates a little bit of nindam, or poking fun at the Lord, in a very loving way. It's quite common. That's why a lot of these kritis are called nindastuti. We have Tyagaraja's Adiki Sukamu, Purandaradasa's Yake Nirdayanadido. In Tamil, we have things like Yenpalli Kundireya, Yette Kandini Iche Kundai Mahale, Nadamadi Tirindu Umakku Idakal Udavamal. And in Marathi, there's a Tukaram Abang Pandaritsa Bhutamote, all in this line of Nindastuti. But he asks in this kind of way, Appa, Shiva, what were you thinking when you took that poison? Adi Shankara basically says he took it so fast, he basically didn't think about it. You know, a kid, when they see something they like, they don't even look, right? They'll just eat it. So he says, did you think this was a jambu palam, your favorite, because of that darkish, bluish, purplish color? Shivan really likes jambu fruit. So he asks, did you think it was that, and just swallow it? Did you think it was a pill given by Siddhar Siddha Gutika? Basically a healing pill given by a holy doctor, Siddhar. Did you think it was a blue gem and you wanted it to adorn your neck? Neela Manir Vibhushana. Pray tell, Shiva, what were you thinking? And during all of this, let's look at what's happening. You know, Shiva is not the only one here. There's also Parvati. So what happens is Shiva is taking the poison and Parvati is watching this unfold. In some stories, Shiva stops the poison in his neck on his own. In others, probably more common, Parvati keeps her hand on his neck to stop the poison from going any further. So if we just saw and we agree that Shiva takes the poison as fast as we described, think about how much faster Devi had to react to stop the poison, because just as fast as he took it, she had to stop it. In English, we say cat-like reflexes. But why stop in the neck? Why stop it right here? Who is Shiva? அண்டச்சராச்சரம் எங்கும் நடுங்க அண்டச்சராச்சரம் எங்கும் நடுங்க அண்டச்சராச்சரம் எங்கும் நடுங்க ஆதிசேடனார் முடிகள் நெருங்க ஆதிசேடனார் முடிகள் நெருங்க பார்ப்புகழும் தில்லை பார்ப்புகழும் தில்லை சிதம்பரநாத பார்ப்புகழும் தில்லை சிதம்பரநாத பார்ப்புகழும் தில்லை சிதம்பரநாத பார்ப்புகழும் தில்லை சிதம்பரநாத பாலகிருஷ்ண பணிந்தேத்திய பாதம் கோபாலகிருஷ்ணன் பணிந்தேத்திய பாதம் தாத்தை என்றாடுவார் அவர் தத்தித்தை என்றாடுவார் தாத்தை என்றாடுவார் அவர் தத்தித்தை என்றாடுவார் தாத்தை என்றாடுவார் அவர் ஜம் தருகிறதை என்றாடுவார் அவர் தத்தித்தை என்றாடுவார் அவர் ஜம் தருகிறதை என்றாடுவார் ஆடுவார் 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 அண்டசராசரம் எங்கும் நடுங்க. The whole universe is contained within him. If he swallowed the poison completely, it would destroy the universe from within him. And if he didn't drink the poison, it would destroy the universe from outside. So the poison is contained in his neck, where it wouldn't affect the cosmos in any way. And it is said in some places that once the poison entered his throat, it became Amritam. But in any case, the poison in his throat caused his throat to become blue, a blue coloration in his throat. Hence the name that we all know, Nilakanta. Another name for this, a synonym for Nilakanta, is mentioned in Lalita Sahasranamam as Shri Khanta Ardha Sharirini. If you break it up, Shri Khanta Ardha Sharirini, one who shares half her form with Shiva. When you think of the word Shri, typically we think of Mahalakshmi. Shri Devi is, Mahalakshmi. However, another meaning of the word Shri is poison. Hence the name Shri Khanta, which is another name or a synonym in the same vein as Nilakanta. So once the poison was contained, or absorbed or taken by Shiva, however you look at it, the cosmos reappeared and all of the devas and asuras came too. Curious as to how the poison disappeared, they turned to Vishnu. For Indra and the devas, actually, they always turn to Brahma and Vishnu first, and we'll actually see how this affects them later. And Vishnu understands. Vishnu looks at Brahma, they share this sly look, and Vishnu understood what happened, and he says to the devas to look inside of them, and they will realize the truth. After some introspective meditation on their soul, their Atma, within each of them, they saw Shiva in the form of a lingam, and they'd realized what happened. Taking Vishnu as the head of the devas, Vishnu goes first, the Devas rushed to Kailasham to seek the blessing of Lord Shiva. And Manikavashakar beautifully alludes to this event in his second song of the Tiruvambavai Padalgal. Pasham Paranjyotikinvai Irapagal Nam Pasham Paranjyotikinvai Irapagal Nam Pasham Paranjyotikinvai Irapagal Nam பேசும்போது போதி போதாரமளிக்கே நேசமும் வைத்தனையோய் நேரிழையாய் நேரிழையீர் நேசமும் வைத்தனையோய் நேரிழையாய் நேரிழையீர் சீச்சி இவையும் சிலவோ விளையாடி ஏசும் இடம் ஏதோ விண்ணோர்கள் ஏத்துதற்கும் ஏசும் இடம் ஏதோ விண்ணோர்கள் ஏத்துதற்கும் கூசும் மலர்பாதம் தந்தருள வந்தருளும் கூசும் மலர்பாதம் தந்தருள வந்தருளும் தேசன் சிவலோகன் தில்லை சீற்றும் பலத்துள் தேசன் சிவலோகன் தில்லை சீற்றும் பலத்துள் ஈசனார் கண்பாடியா அரேலோரம்பாவாய் ஈசனார் கண்பாடியா அரேலோரம்பாவாய். Such beautiful songs, each and every one of the Tiruvambavai Padals. But in this line, ஏசும் இடம் ஈதோ விண்ணோர்கள் ஏத்துதற்கும் கூசும் மலர்பாதம் தந்தருள வந்தருளும். This is the line that alludes to this incident. Let's imagine Shiva sitting in a simhasana on Kailasham, so one leg up and one leg down. The Devas come rushing to Kailasham, and as they come to take refuge at his padam, his sharana, his feet, he quickly pulls it away. The foot that's down, he quickly pulls it away. So why would he do that? The Devas themselves are falling at your feet. Would anyone pull that away? And there's a few explanations for this as well. In the Skanda Puranam, Shiva is angered that the Devas took a huge undertaking, such as turning the ocean to get Amritam, without first seeking his blessings. And actually in Skanda Puranam, it goes into the importance of actually doing Ganesha Puja as well. So he's angered that they ignored him and Ganesha. Why? One, Ganesha, because he removes all the obstacles. That is why he is appointed as Ganesha Vigna Vinayaka. And then why is he angered that they neglected him, Shiva? Because the purpose of getting Amritam is to gain immortality, to never die. But they neglected to pray to Shiva, who is Mrityunjayan, the conqueror of death himself. He says, you know, you always go to Brahma, you always go to Vishnu, but you never come to me, you ignore me, you disrespect me. Therefore, you had to face the consequence of death. I saved you out of my mercy, but now you must learn. Manikavashakar explanation, Yeshum Midam Mido, Vinnorgal Yetudarkum Kushum Malarpadam Tandarula Vandarulum, that we just heard, in my opinion, is actually even more beautiful. Shiva says to the Devas, you seek to be immortal, forever youthful, forever living in your world, your Devaloka. Hence, you seek to stay apart from me, the Paramatma, forever. So you will never attain a place at my padam. In the Mahakalpam, they will be destroyed in their loka. So they never attain a place at Shiva's padam. However, my bhaktas on earth, they actively seek me and wish to become one with me as their janmam ends. And therefore, it is for them that I willingly give my padam. I will show them my padam. Kushum malar padam tandarula vandarulum. He doesn't just show it, he comes and gives his padam to us. And such a beautiful expression really shows the difference between traditional literature and poetry compared to those steeped in bhakti and devotion. So now, coming full circle back to why Pradosham is celebrated on Trayodashi. Couple explanations for this as well, all surrounding the idea of Shiva taking the poison. It is said that the Devas received, so after this incident, they resumed churning the ocean, and they received the Amritam on Dvadashi, the 12th day. And after the battle, after Shiva also aids them in the battle against the Asuras, the Devas seek forgiveness from Shiva on Trayodashi and do puja. The other explanation in certain stories is that after Shiva takes the poison, he falls into a deep slumber. And actually, there's a temple dedicated to this in a town in Tamil Nadu called Shuttapalli, where Shiva takes the form of Palli Kondeshwarar. If you look at the Murti just from the surface, he actually looks like Ranganatha. He has his hand against his head, he's sleeping. But there's a lot of differences. It's actually Shiva sleeping on on Uma Devi's lap. And it is said that he woke up during the Pradosha Kalam on Trayodashi. In any case, on Trayodashi, regardless of the explanation, the Devas sought forgiveness from Shiva and praised him to a point where he reached ecstasy and began dancing in the evening time. Dimita dimita dimi dimi kita kita tum. Tom tom tarikita kita tum. Matanga munivara vandita isha. Sarvadigambara veshtita vesha. Matanga munivara vandita isha. Sarvadigambara veshtita vesha. Nritya niranjana nritya natesha. Isha Sarvesha Sarvesha Dimita Dimita Dimi Dimi Kita Kita Tom Tom Tarikita Tarikita Kita Matanga Munivara Vandita Isha Sarvadigambara Veshtita Vesha Nritya Niranjana Nritya Natesha Isha Sarvesha Sarvesha Dimita Dimita Dimi Dimi Kita Kita Tom Tom Tarikita Tarikita Kita Matanga Munivara Vandita Isha Sarvadigambara Veshtita Vesha Nritya Niranjana Nritya Natesha Isha Sarvesha Sarvesha Bho Shambho Shiva Shambho Swayambho Gangadhara Shankara Karunakara Mamava Bhayasagara Dayaka Bho Shambho Shiva Shambho Swayambho Bho Shambho Shiva Shambho Swayambho Shiva Shambho Swayambho Shiva Shambho Swayambho Shiva Shambho Swayambho Swayambho Swayambho. So in like that, Shiva dances in supreme ecstasy, as we saw in the beginning. You can see we actually spent quite a bit of time just talking about the event of Shiva drinking the poison. And you can imagine how long it would take to comprehend the significance of the rest of the story of the churning of the ocean. It's such a big, big story with so many details and events. And we just looked at one, what some people consider as a shorter event, and it takes this long. So on Pradosham, more so than the origin of Pradosham, one of the main components is the Vratam, the penance on Lord Shiva, the penance that is said should be observed at this time. There are also lots of stories surrounding the significance and the importance of observing Pradosha Vratam as well. In the Skanda Mahapuranam, there's a story about a poor brahmachari woman by the name of Uma, who was widowed and had an infant son of her own. One day, while out begging for alms, she came across an orphaned infant lying under a tree. She was hesitant to go near the child or pick him up, fearing the unknown nature of this birth, back when, the caste system was important. But then Lord Shiva, in the guise of a beggar himself, instructed her to take the child and raise him as her own. The boys grew up together, adhering to the traditions of Brahmins and Brahmacharis, and they sustained themselves and their mother on alms. While out begging one day, the mother and the boys came across a temple where a wise sage looked at the family and instantly recognized the orphaned boy, the adopted son. He explained to Uma that the boy under the tree was in fact a prince whose father was killed in battle. After fleeing from the kingdom, his mother gave birth, but then she too perished after being attacked by a crocodile. The sage explained that the father in his previous life was a prosperous king and a devout Shiva Bhakta. During Pradosham, the king was performing puja, but was interrupted by a revolt in which an enemy king was captured by a minister. The king, enraged, immediately ordered that the enemy king be sentenced to death. So one, he sentenced a man to death during Pradosha Kalam on Trayodashi Pradosham. On top of this, the king neglected to finish the Pradosha Puja, took food and water, and went to sleep. Therefore, he suffered an ill fate in his next life, the life of the king that perished in battle. The mother in her previous life had fraudulently assassinated or killed her co-wife. Back then, kings had multiple wives. And therefore, she too suffered a dismal end in her next life. The son, the orphan boy, was also the son in the previous life. And since both his parents committed these atrocities, the son too was destined to be born into unfortunate circumstances and live in poverty. The sage explains that those who perform penance and puja to Shiva during Pradosham time will attain wealth, progeny, luck, all the comforts in the world, and mainly it will erase all of our past sins. He tells the brahmachari lady to instruct her sons to do Pradosha Puja every Trayodashi Pradosham. In due course, the boys performed the puja regularly, and eventually, by the grace of Shiva, the orphaned prince regained his kingdom, got married to a princess, established a very prosperous kingdom, and the brahmachari woman and her own son lived together with him in prosperity and happiness. So this story is in the Skanda Mahapurana to highlight the importance of Pradosha Vratam. And much like we've been saying a couple times through this, the sage also describes that during this Pradosha Kalam, it is that time in which Shiva dances in ecstasy, and all of the devatas and divine beings surround him. Brahman தாளம் போட மால் படகந்தனே முழக்க பேராவாணி அருமையாம் வீணை கொள்ள சீர்குழலி ரவி சசியும் அடைவாயோட கிருபையுடன் தேவரொலி செய்ய நந்தி மத்தளம் சங்கீதத்தை தும்புருழங்க ரசம் பிறக்க சிவனாடும் நட்டனத்தை போற்றுவேனே. So Shivan dances in ecstasy. All the devas surround him. Brahman is putting Tanam. Vishnu is doing Nattvangam. Veena, Saraswati is playing the Veena. Nandi is playing the Mattalam. Tumburu is keeping Shruti on the tambura and such. And Shiva dances. Everything, all devatas, all energies are focused on Shiva dancing in the middle. So while all of the devatas are fixated upon Shiva, so should we also meditate and fixate upon Shiva during this Pradosha Kalam, do Sevanam. The procedure for Shiva worship and puja is given in great detail across our Puranas, Agamas, and Shastras. Everything from how to set up the pujas, how to wash this, the mandapam, how to put the rangoli, the kolam, where to place the murti, how to do this, all of the various upacharams, and even certain special mantras as well. However, one of the beauties of Shiva is his nature of being Ashutoshi, one who is easily pleased. Navanita Hridaya Sadaya Guru Guhatata Madhyam Veda Vedyam Vitaraginam Aprameya Dvaita Pratipadyam Sangeetavadya Vinoda Tandavajata Bahutara Veda Chodyam Panini Samagata Janu Sanini Jam Tadita Samagama Pani Magata Janu Takamagama Pasanini Tajam Taripa Magata Dinginatum Jam Taripa Magata Dinginatum Tajam Taripa Magata Dinginatum Ananda Natana Prakasham Chitsabesham Ashriyami Shivakam Balisham Navanita Hridaye, one whose heart is like butter. Again, there's actually a lot of meanings behind this that Muthuswami Dikshidhar has so beautifully put in this Kirtana. But we'll just look at one in this context. Navanita Hridaye, one whose heart is soft and melts so easily, becomes softened so quickly. Ashutoshi. So after giving all the instructions in detail, quite a lot of detail in our texts, one clause that always comes at the end, or at least as far as I know, is it says that a person should only worship per their monetary capacity. That means we shouldn't overextend ourselves in the pursuit of bhakti and worship, but rather we must do what we can. You know, we can't expect someone who's poor to host huge yajnas with silk veshti offerings and the choicest of fruits. We can't do that, and Shiva doesn't expect that either. You know, to draw a parallel, we look at the story of Kuchela Sudhama. All he brings for Krishna is aval and poha, and that itself is enough. And it's not even his own poha; it's poha that his wife borrowed from the next door neighbor and wrapped in a bundle made from her own tattered sari. So the fact that our texts have these clauses and these statements, you know, in some cases it'll say the best thing you can do is this, but if you can't do it, do this. It'll give you kind of tiers of worship, all with the same fruit, all with the same palan, but more about what an individual is able to do with their capacity. So the fact that our texts say this shows that regardless of procedure, it is bhakti and pure intention that ultimately pleases Shiva. Yemi se tora linga, yemi se tora, yemi se tora linga, yemi se tora. Ganga udakamu తెచ్చి నీకు లింగ పూజలు చేదమంటే గంగ ఉదకము తెచ్చి నీకు లింగ పూజలు చేదమంటే గంగను నా చాప కప్ప ఎంగిలిటు నాదిలింగ గంగలు నా చాప కప్ప ఎంగిలిటు నాదిలింగ మహానుభావ మాదేవ శంభో మాలింగమూర్తి ఏమి సేతురాలింగ ఏమి సేతురా. అక్షయావుల పాడి తెచ్చి అర్పితము చేదమంటే ఓహో అక్షయావుల పాడి తెచ్చి అర్పితము చేదమంటే అక్షయావుల లేగదూడా ఎంగిలతో నాదిలింగ అక్షయావుల లేగదూడా ఎంగిలతో నాదిలింగ మహానుభావ మాదేవ శంభో మాలింగమూర్తి ఏమి సేతురాలింగ ఏమి సేతురా. తుమ్మి పువ్వులు తెచ్చి నీకు తుష్టగా పూసేదమంటే ఓహో తుమ్మి పువ్వులు తెచ్చి నీకు తుష్టుగా పూసేదమంటే కొమ్మ కొమ్మకు చాటి తుమ్మెద ఎంగిలిటు నాదిలింగ కొమ్మ కొమ్మకు కోటి తుమ్మెద ఎంగిలిటు నాదిలింగ మహానుభావ మాదేవ శంభో మాలింగమూర్తి ఏమి సేతురాలింగ ఏమి సేతురా ఏమి సేతురాలింగ This is such a beautiful Telugu tattvam in which the composer asks, is there anything I can offer you that's pure enough, O Linga? I thought about the water from the Ganges, but that is contaminated with the spit of tadpoles and river dwellers. Gangalunna Chapakappa. I could offer milk, but that has the spit of calves in it. Akshayavula Legaduda. Even flowers have the spit of thousands of bees that have laid on them. Kumma kummaku koti tummeda. So what can I offer you? The devotee is struggling. See, we all do our best to offer the best things we can to the Lord. So we peel the stickers off of fruits and we'll wash them thoroughly. Some will buy organic milk, honey, and other organic ingredients for abhishekam. We spend time, and in fact, sometimes lots of time, making the best foods we can to offer for Naivedyam, worrying all the while we can't taste it if something is wrong. And all of this is great, and we should definitely continue to strive to give only the best we can. That is actually all we can do, really. But as we saw with the poison turning into amritam in Shiva's throat, as long as our intentions are pure, any impurities that we may have overlooked, forgotten, or had no control over will be sanctified once offered to Shiva. He is Shiva. He is the purest form there is. So one of the last points I'll get to is, apart from just Shiva Puja, Shiva Samarpanam on Pradoshakalam, a lot of our Shastras and our Mahans and Gurus talk about this idea of Japam, Tavam, meditation. Manikyavachakar says this in a lot of his works in Tiruvachagam, as do all of the other Nalvas in Tevaram, Adi Shankaracharya, Mahapariva, many other great saints, and not just on Shiva. We have this idea of Nama Sankirtanam, and typically when we think of Nama Sankirtanam, we think Rama Nama Sankirtanam, Govinda Nama Sankirtanam. But there is Shiva Nama Sankirtanam as well for those who are devoted to Shiva. We can do Shiva Nama Sankirtanam. And it doesn't matter what name you choose. You can choose Shiva. You can choose Pashupate. You can choose Uma Maheshwara, Shambho, Shankara. It doesn't really matter what you choose. Bholo nata umapate, bholo nata umapate, Shambho Shankar Pashupate, bholo nata umapate, Shambho Shankar Pashupate, Nandivagana Nagabhushana Chandrasekhara Jatadara, Nandivagana Nagabhushana Chandrasekhara Jatadara, Shuladhara Jyoti Prakasha Vibhuti Sundara Paramesha, Shuladhara Jyoti Prakasha Vibhuti Sundara Paramesha, He Bolo Nata Umapate, Shambho Shankar Pashupate, He Bolo Nata Umapate, Shambho Shankar Pashupate, Kailasavasa Kanakasabesha Gauri Manohar Vishvesha, Kailasavasa Kanakasabesha Gauri Manohar Vishvesha, Smashanavasa Chidambaresha Neelakanta Mahadeva, Smashanavasa Chidambaresha Neelakanta Mahadeva, Bolo Nath उमापते शंभो शंकर पशुपते हे बोलो नाथा उमापते शंभो शंकर पशुपते हे बोलो नाथा उमापते शंभो शंकर पशुपते शंभो शंकर पशुपते शंभो शंकर पशुपते. So it doesn't matter what name you choose, Umapate, Shambho Shankara, Nandivahana, Chandrasekhara, Shiva Shiva, Shiva Shiva, Tennadure, Shivane Potri, Tiruchitrambalam, it doesn't matter what you choose. Shiva will always be listening. So as I wind down, I want to just reiterate some of the important aspects of Shivan that we see through Pradosham. One of them being that Shiva is the eternal being. Eventually, everything will come back to Shiva. Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. Irtenne Atkunde Ende Perumana. It doesn't matter which way you look at it, which way you say it. Our Mahans have said, in the end, there is only Shivoham. There is only that eternal Shiva, that Paramatma. And as Shiva himself said, as bhaktas, if our intentions are pure, if we meditate upon him, he will be pleased. He will himself come and bring us to him. Kushum malarpadam tandarula vandarunam, we saw that. The second is the importance of puja, which we just looked at. But not doing puja in the most grandiose way possible. Doing puja the best we can and making sure that we do it with shraddha and bhakti, which is really the most important thing Shiva looks for. And actually not just Shiva, you'll see this with every other deity when you look at their puja. They're really focused on just, we saw it, Sudama, Krishna, and Lakshmi in the form of Rukmini were pleased with just a handful of poha. And then Shivanama Japam, Nama Sankirtanam of Shiva. Not just Rama, not just Govinda, Shiva as well. Just the chanting of Shiva Shiva. Actually, in the very, very, very beginning, the song we sang was Shiva 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 Yanarada. Tyagaraja Swami reiterated the importance of the Shivanama Japam. And then finally, I would just like to extend my gratitude and my thanks to the Chicago Kalibari Temple for giving me this opportunity to talk about Shri Parvati Parameshwara, Uma Maheshwara, Sadashiva on such an auspicious day as Trayodashi Pradosham. It is really truly a blessing and an honor. And then I'd also like to extend my thanks to all of you who are listening. I know we're still living in these trying times, but it is good to take moments in our lives to meditate upon the Parabrahma, to learn about what it means to look into oneself, to discover that Shiva, that Chidananda Rupaha Shivoham Shivoham. And I do really hope that you enjoyed this program and potentially learned something along the way. I'll conclude with a Mangalam on the Panchakshara Mantram, taught to me by my Gurukul Sri Chandrasekhar Gurukul. Om Mangalam, Omkara Mangalam, Om Namah Shivaya Mantra Mangalam, Om Mangalam, Omkara Mangalam, Om Namah Shivaya Mantra Mangalam, Namangalam, Nakara Mangalam, Nadavindu Kalatita Guruve Mangalam, Om Mangalam, Omkara Mangalam, Om Namah Shivaya Mantra Mangalam, मामङ्गलं मकारमङ्गलं मन्दहासमोदहारि गुरुवे मङ्गलम् ॐ मङ्गलम् ओङ्कारमङ्गलम् ॐ नमः शिवाय मन्त्रमङ्गलम् श्रीमङ्गलं शिकारमङ्गलं शिव्यतापशीघ्रहारि गुरुवे मङ्गलम् ॐ मङ्गलम् ओङ्कारमङ्गलम् ॐ नमः शिवाय मन्त्रमङ्गलम् वामङ्गलं वकारमङ्गलं वागतीतवैद्यनाथ गुरुवे मङ्गलम् ॐ मङ्गलम् ओङ्कारमङ्गलम् ॐ नमः शिवाय मन्त्रमङ्गलम् या मङ्गलं यकारमङ्गलं यक्षराजयोगमाय गुरुवे मङ्गलम् ॐ मङ्गलम् ओङ्कारमङ्गलम् ॐ नमः शिवाय मन्त्रमङ्गलम् ॐ मङ्गलम् ओङ्कारमङ्गलम् ॐ नमः शिवाय मन्त्रमङ्गलम् ॐ नमः शिवाय मन्त्रमङ्गलम् ॐ नमः शिवाय मन्त्रमङ्गलम् हर हर पार्वती पतये नमः हर हर महादेव।